change the lot of Guyanese. And we've led the struggle for independence and subsequently for freedom from the PNC's dictatorship. We've also, since coming back into office in '92, if you look at the economic history of the country now, you will see what we have done in this country pre-oil. And that's substantiated by facts, and no one can take that away from the PPP. Not the rumor mills, not the pontification by self-righteous people. They can't change the facts that the PPP took a bankrupt country, couldn't pay its way. The country that has been documented was one of the poorest in the hemisphere, and not by the PPP. You should look at the Caribbean Conference of Churches and many others. The IMF, the State Department reports that people love to go to, and you will see that we have transformed that country into the most vibrant economy in this part of the world pre-oil. And so that history, we need to speak about it and to be proud of it. And we spoke extensively about a big challenge that has always been a challenge in this country, about the question of racism. So I saw an editorial in the Stabroek News today, and they said that racism is complex and historically rooted, as though we don't know that. And because it's complex and historically rooted, and it was foisted on our people, the divisions that came in the 50s were engineered, and the people who helped the engineering of that, the local counterparts of this engineered division of our people, many are still alive and many are still in the PNC. Mr. Hamilton Green is one of those. And this is clearly documented, and if you need evidence of it, you just have to go to the source documents. It was an engineered division, and then 3 decades of undemocratic and racist rule did not help the country to bring people together. So we are painfully aware that the racism that we sometimes experience in Guyana has a historical precedent. So we are not naive about that. Secondly, we believe that we must speak about it openly. It's the countries that want to sweep this issue under the carpet, or believe that speaking about racism is the purview of a selected group of people. Then they're wrong. The PPP has a history of confronting the most troublesome issues head on, and we will do so now. So the fact I saw the editorial said that we were there to whitewash the historic racism that exists in Guyana. We're not whitewashing the historic racism, we're confronting it. And they said that it seems as though we shared notes. President Ali and me as General Secretary of the party. We didn't share notes, but if we believe the matter is sufficiently serious to warrant the attention of both the President and the General Secretary of our party. And that is why we spoke about it, because we attach great importance to national unity. And we believe we have to fight racism head on. So it seems as though we were stepping on the toes of some people. Some NGOs, self-righteous NGOs, believe that they're the only ones who can talk about racism. And heaven saves this country should we have national unity, because what else will they do? They do nothing else in this country except stoking racism. They live for that. They don't have constituencies. They want a divided country because it creates an opportunity for their own relevance. And some newspapers and NGOs live on this. They're praying that we'll never have a multiracial party like the PPP in this country, and that it grows stronger and stronger, or that we have national unity, because they wouldn't have reason to exist. That's why they react in such a manner. And secondly, this editorial is so concerned about us speaking on racism. But for the past 2.5 years, every single day, the PNC has been not only speaking about racism, but has been practicing racism. They couldn't find an editorial about PNC's racism. Every single utterance out of their mouth and the opposition has been about racism and demonstrates this. But one speech condemning racism and saying we are a party that will fight it with all of our strength and try to bring all of our people together, there warrants an editorial. But not a single editorial about the daily occurrences of racism and the promotion of racism. And it says it needs more than words. That's what the guest editorial said. And I suspect, as it says, it's a guest editorial. It might not be the core view of the Stabroek News, because from time to time they bring in these jaundiced people to write things, and this is a guest editorial. And maybe from a PNC man himself who wrote this. But so first of all, people were upset. Some of them from this self-righteous group, and Mr. Norton was upset too. So they were upset for different reasons. Now, the editorial, I saw somewhere people said it was cheap politics. I think it was the Stabroek News again, for me to hail out Mr. Farrier, who came to our Babujan activity, and I saw him in the crowd, and I said, I welcome Mr. Farrier here. He's a relative of Mr. Norton, and I'm glad he sees the light. That's all. It was in passing. It wasn't intended for as a gimmick or any serious consideration. But this tells you a lot. Mr. Norton's reaction to something, a passing comment by me, tells you a lot about the individual. Now, we spoke at Babujan about the development program of this country and how we intend to ensure that all of our people benefit. We talk about health care, we talk about job creation, we talk about fighting racism, we talk about the oil and gas sector, ensuring that more benefits come to our people. Mr. Norton did not have a single thing on that day to say about any of the policy issues. On the way back down, I saw he issued a statement saying the man is not his brother. I never said the man is his brother. And two, the man is a criminal, he's an arsonist, and birds of a feather flock together, meaning we're criminals too. So I recall the gentleman sending me a note with a childhood picture of them together, with a long thing about how his mother took care of Norton and Norton is useless. And I asked him, I called him and said, can I release it? And he said, yeah, release it. So Mr. Norton then left Bamba Mali and went to Bench Cup program, and I thought was to talk about Babu Jan and the policy making, to deny that the man is his relative. Now, clearly, what does this say to you about a leader? That this is small thinking, petty-mindedness. No, only a junior functionary mentality could conjure up something like that. As I said before, Norton is not cut from leadership cloth. You have a whole range of policy-making issues to address and to represent the alternative. And that's all you are going to talk about. Oh, this man is now my relative. That's all. From a passing comment, I've said before, and it was on full display, that it demonstrated the morose nature of Mr. Norton, his vindictiveness, the bitter side he has. He's now ready to address serious matters. And so, but it tells you something else. Now, this guy was one of the key activists for APNU in 2020. And it's true that he was questioned for arson in the Linden issues when we had a fire there. The fact is he was a key activist for the PNC. And Mr. Norton just threw him under the bus. Now he's a criminal. And this is, I've said this before, the PNC has no gratitude or loyalty to people who basically, what in a Guyanese way, throw their belly out for them, work very hard for them. They did it with all their polling agents. Said that the PPP bribed them. People who acted conscientiously for them. So it tells you a lot about the PNC. That small comment that Mr. Norton has made is demonstrating his vindictiveness. He is not commented, or at the first day, all he was focused on is a passing comment that I made at Babu Jan. But we dealt with more fundamental issues there that should be of. We accuse the PNC as a racist party. He has a hard time defending that because it is true. It's racist. And it wasn't just the fact, as Starbuck News pointed out, that we had a multi-racial crowd here, which most parties in this country can't put together. That's a fact. We were saying, look at this crowd, but look at our policies too. Look at our history. Look at Chedi Jagan's history of fighting for national and racial unity. So yes, the multi-ethnic crowd we have here is because of our policies. It is not a contrived thing. It is because over the years we have worked consistently through our policy making on our programs and government activities to bring people together. And I'm not going to spend today, because I can give you evidence of this. I can give you evidence of every little thing in communities that are nearly 100% Afro-Guyanese. And when we compare the history, the economic history of those communities, and that has to be done if Starbuck News and the others are serious and they want to be independent arbiters and brokers. Be fair to us too. Be fair to us. Look at the economic history of these communities. Take Linden, for example, and then you will see the progress made under the PPP versus APNU. Economic progress. Look at job opportunities in this country. Look at ownership, from land to vehicles, etc., and see which era people have made the greatest advances economically in life. And you will see that it all happened under the PPP. People of every race, including Afro-Guyanese. So we need to be fair about that. Now, clearly, one example used in this editorial, this guest editorial, and I want to spend a bit of time on this because it's important that the country kicks into this analytical mode. So, says one example of President Ali intransigent is the refusal to conform the appointments and the offices of the Chancellor of the Judiciary and the Chief Justice. So that is seen as PPP racism. Now, Karl Singh, you recall how this provision came into the Constitution. It came out of, before we had this provision, the constitutional provision is the president could make the appointment through a consultation with the leader of the opposition. Last week I explained about all of the constitutional reforms that we put in place to ensure governance, greater governance or shared governance. And there are several of those features in the Constitution. Last week I spoke about that when we spoke about the issue of executive power sharing. So, but one of the features was this one too, to have greater collaboration between the parties in appointment of the top posts in the judiciary. Now, it never really worked because the opposition, when I was president, vetoed the appointment effectively, a substantive post. So we couldn't appoint. Karl Singh acted for many years, left the office, and was never confirmed. It wasn't racism at that time. Now, Granger didn't confirm anyone. In fact, he wanted to remove the current chancellor by touting another name, not the current chancellor. And he, after putting up some search committee, it wasn't racism then. Now it becomes racism. But assuming President Ali goes through a search committee and brings in an Indo-Guyanese now, suggests that he becomes the Chancellor or the Chief Justice, and confirm them, that will be, what will that be? We have two Afro-Guyanese now heading the judiciary, who have been heading the judiciary. So, and this is seen as racism because he refuses to conform or is not prepared to act immediately on conforming them. Records matter. So how could this be racism, but it's cited as an example of racism? Then it mentions about the historic issue. And I wanted to address this at Babujan from the perspective of duplicity, but I did not have the time. So I want to thank them for bringing it up, the guest editorial, about what happened in 2015. Now, it's well documented what took place in 2015 when APNU was campaigning in some villages. We had it on tape, it was recorded, what they did in the morning, election morning, beating some drums, urging people to come out and throw these. At that time, some of the activists used this word, "pulling people out," and I mentioned that. And I said at Babujan the same day If anyone in the PPP uses this sort of language, we'll kick them out. It was a condemnation of racism. I said, we will not tolerate that language in the PPP. When Christopher Ram, Jaundice Christopher Ram, and I would have sued him for defamation because when the case was thrown out, but we're in opposition and I thought it would distract from throwing the PNC out of office at that time. That's why I didn't take legal action against him. But he wanted to get in APNU's good book. So he filed a private criminal charge against me. Didn't put in the part where I said, if anyone in the PPP uses this sort of language, we'll kick them out. It was a condemnation of racism. And then they got a jaundice magistrate too, to prevent me from, for a private criminal charge, to prevent me from traveling. Of course, all of that is water under the bridge. And had it not been we're in opposition and I was the leader of opposition, I would have taken legal action against both of them. But they bring that back up in an editorial as though it's a fact. And if you only fact-checked what took place, it was a condemnation of racism. So this is something I just wanted to set the record right. But this same Christopher Ram today, you had a WPA person who said that Indians were brought in this country and they used to live in pipes in India. I don't know what kind of pipe she was talking about, but she said they were living in some slum pipes or something maybe. And the conscience of the country, Christopher Ram, did not see it necessary to file a private criminal action. The conscience of the country, because he was sucking up to APNU at that time. He was hoping probably to get a big post in government elections, were just about to be held, and he wanted to target me because I was racist. So that's it. We need to go back and look at the history of it and fact check a lot of these issues. Now, we will continue. Let me say to those in the media and also in these NGOs, we don't believe fighting racism is the purview of some obscure group. We believe it's part of our DNA, part of the PPP's philosophy, part of our government's approach, and every single day we will fight racism in words and in deeds too, by making sure that people feel included. If we did not believe that there was a historic problem, coming back to the question of history, in opposition, we're the only party that said, and as General Secretary of the party, I said, the People's Progressive Party will work harder to ensure that our party looks like the country. Our policies are clearly, on our policy making, is for all the people of the country. But we have a lot of Indo-Guyanese in the party. Our Amerindian membership has grown enormously in the party, major way, and we are underrepresented by Afro-Guyanese in the party. Which other party has made such a public admission? This was years ago when we were in opposition. And we continue to speak about this, and we said we will work hard to change that. And we're doing so. And we've seen people like Mr. Ferrier and many others, who are coming to the party because they see what we stand for. Which other party? So when they said we don't The Babujan speech was not the be-all and the end-all. It was the president of the country and the general secretary of the largest party in this country saying that our commitment is to fight racism and to build a multi-ethnic party. We should have been applauded for that. But you know what? We're stepping on the toes of some organizations that believe they're the only ones can speak about this. They don't have work otherwise. They don't have work otherwise. And as I said before, they will rule the day, or they will, they just don't want. They just don't want our country to be united, or else they may not have a role for themselves. We'll come back, and I wanted to address that. I've not seen on March 28th, a couple days after this Babujan activity, the WPA, the defunct WPA that's trying to resurrect itself, had another meeting where the racist rhetoric was even ramped up. And we have not seen any condemnation from us for condemning racism and saying we will fight racism. And WPA had one of the most racist set of meetings, and we didn't see anything of that nature. The same sort of holier than thou attitude was not displayed there. So we heard Clive Thomas said that we are, and then they had a press conference to reinforce this, that we are bribing people, Afro-Guyanese, to come to us. So this concept of bribe, and it follows what David Hines has been saying, that Geeta Chandan is a slave catcher. They doubled down on that rhetoric at the last meeting, and he explained why he called her a slave catcher. Nobody has been condemning this. Because they believe that any Afro-Guyanese who has come to us, that's his concept, they have been brought over either by bribe or induced to come over. So this goes to the philosophy of ownership. And it's a racist philosophy that in this country you can only identify with a group based on race, not on economic interests, not on progress, not on who is doing better for the country, not on any of those sorts of things. But regardless of what the WPA and the PNC do, destroy the country, kill democracy, being undemocratic. If you're Afro-Guyanese, you're bound to turn a blind eye to all of that. When you take away the $10,000 from your children, or don't give you any scholarship but take scholarship for themselves, or no housing, you must turn a blind eye to all of that and stay in this camp based on race, which is what we are trying to break down. Listen to the philosophy behind what they're saying. So you're being bribed. So if you get your house lot, or you get a job under the PPP, or you get a grant or a scholarship, it's a bribe. The ones who you must work hard now to elect those so they could collect the bribes, like Clive Thomas and Ogunseya and the Hines, they were all part of the PNC machinery. They were all getting cushy jobs. They were driving fancy vehicles. They stayed quiet on rigging elections. They're talking about democracy now, but David Hines wanted elections canceled, the last elections, when he knew they lost the elections. So, and power sharing for them is only when you're out of office, you want power sharing, executive power sharing, but you want to bully your way in. We can come in through the guns and force our way in. They're not going to intimidate the PPP. We know their number. Clive Thomas and David Hines, they've been con men and fooling people all their lives. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to say it. All of their lives, only for their own personal self-aggrandizement. We saw it in the last government. They were not fighting for Afro-Guyanese. Their silence was bought by the cushy jobs that they had. And so they've made this a business. People have to see through this. This is a defunct party that is trying to resurrect itself by polarizing our country. Polarizing, that's all they live for. They want, so anybody who receives any benefits and have come to us, we made it clear, we're working to gain support by what we have done. We are not ashamed to say as a political party, we want greater support in Afro-Guyanese communities, but we're prepared to work for it. Work for it by ensuring we address people's concerns, and that's what we're addressing. And not they believe they can do this. So this is what we have seen from all the noise recently. And you know, the PNC doesn't want to openly push the racism line because they're under scrutiny now, international scrutiny and everyone else, because what they've tried in the US with Rickford Burke, another criminal, and he is a criminal, not for what he says, he's using the social media posts to extort, blackmail businessmen for money. This is a con man, a criminal who resides in the US, who every day spouts racism. The same self-righteous people will not for a single day condemn him. Not a single day condemn him. But they are not succeeding. They've sought, you recall some institute they had for action against discrimination. I saw they had a meeting in West Coast Barbados. They have one now in Golden Grove. So APNU cannot carry the racist rhetoric because having gone abroad and argued this, so they're using these front organizations, the WPA and this one, to carry the racist rhetoric to the community. And then they would roll in to reap the political rewards. So we have seen this playbook over and over again. And you will not have the self-righteous, the TIGIs or the GHRA condemning this. You won't see that condemnation. Self-righteous, but they will condemn a speech we make condemning racism. But if you listen to the rhetoric, it's all racist. From the criminal bar to this or Institute for Action Against Discrimination. They're busy setting up all these institutes. They wrote, you recall last year, some letter was signed by most of them to Vice President Kamala Harris. And when you look at it, it's outright laughable, the things that they put in the letter to Vice President Kamala Harris. Downright laughable. So we know their record. They're using a playbook that's old. They need to reinvent their playbook. They've done that historically. If anyone wants to look at the historic ways that the PNC has promoted racism, it is through the rumor mills. They go to some communities and they spread rumors on the ground and the rumor machinery, about the PPP and racism, and that's not succeeding so much because they're being exposed. You recall Rickford Burke running to the camera the last time when David Hines said that Nagaputu and Ramjatan just served one purpose, was to bring Indian votes to the PNC. That came out. That would have been said in a circle without social media, without it coming out. And so we have seen, don't take this WPA seriously. I saw Ogun said he wants to plead guilty to treason. This guy is a non-entity, never had an impact on the country, nor anybody, never fought for a single person. Probably was part of the machinery that helped cause Walter Rodney's demise. They never condemned the PNC. They're in bed with the PNC, the people who killed Walter Rodney, their leader. In fact, that's the group. So we are not going to be sidetracked by this defunct organization. It's defunct. They're the new conduit and this for pushing the racism that the PNC wants. They probably decided carefully that this is how it would best serve their interests if they have a division of labor, and their job is to push the racism. And then Norton issues these lofty statements. The ERC looks very racist, but I want them to act professionally. Well, if the ERC is acting professionally, and I hope that they will do this urgently, then they should examine all of these statements. Now I wanted to, in the same vein, because many people we have had some criticisms from some of the same groups and maybe other well-meaning people who believe that we're intolerant to criticisms. And we have always fought for a free press, the PPP. It's not a criticism. It's when it comes from the self-righteous group. And the last time I spoke here, that the same level of scrutiny that government is afforded to government, civil society and should also be put under the same level of scrutiny to determine legitimacy and whether they represent interests or personal views. So if the media wants to be fair, then they should put the same yardstick, use the same yardstick to measure legitimacy for all the groups. So there are a few civil society organizations that have big constituencies that we've been engaging with. These are the ones that have big constituencies. The religious organizations, they have large numbers of people. We have a great relationship with them, with the religious groups in this country, and we've been working to ensure that religious freedom, as protected by our Constitution, blossoms in our country and that people are tolerant. We have had a little stormy relationship with the labor movement, largely because we believe that the TUC has been hijacked by some PNC individuals and of evidence. They are not preponderance of evidence. They are not preponderance of evidence. They are not